Well, I think we'll maybe handle this meeting kind of like our Zoom call. So I'll talk about a few things, and then we have another mic here we can pass around for people to ask questions or make comments. So when we planned for this meeting weeks ago, we were thinking one thing, and today it's completely different. So anyway, I'll just get started. So a lot of things have kind of come to a head this last week, and some of them I can I can talk about, and some I can't. And I'll just kind of give an overall view from my perspective, and then like I say, whatever people have to say or ask is great. So of course, all of you would know that the Grace Report came out last Thursday. I'll just tell you a little bit how that happened. I was at Juneau when I guess I received it. And then this last Monday, I met the survivor in Seattle, and we talked about what we would do with the report. And by the time I got to Walla Walla, that had changed. And there was kind of a lot of pressure put on me to like send out the report with a letter by today. And I prayed about it, and I absolutely had no peace at all. And that's putting it mildly. And so I let the people know who had the report in their hands that that's how it was. I felt like the Lord was giving me real strong guidance in that way, and they decided they would put it out anyway. And anyway, I don't want to say anything about the motives or anything else. I mean, I'm just telling you what happened. I'm not trying to put any big spin on this, other than to say that I guess it was just pretty surprising on my part. And I felt kind of sad about the way it was handled. But, and so the way it went out was not our intention. Maybe it's good just for you to know that much. I actually think that in a way that what has transpired through this last week, I think it's actually been good. I hope we'll say that looking back. But so one thing that became very clear to me is we have to prioritize Christ. And if the Lord is moving me in a certain direction, and I feel it really, really strongly, it actually is a serious thing to me when that is not considered important, and there's other things that are more important. And I think, and I've heard this, people in this room have already said this. This is just repeating what we've talked about this last year. And that is that Jesus said that we'll always have the poor with us. That didn't mean he didn't care for the poor. He absolutely did. But Christ we won't always have with us. And we're always going to have victims with us, but we're not always going to have Christ. And it's like Jesus said to a man that was apparently being called to the ministry, "Will go and sell all that you have and give it to the poor." He cared for the poor, but then you come and follow me. He prioritized Christ, and I think we have to come to that. So another thing that has happened this week, and I know there's some of you that are going, well, yes, we've been telling you this all along, but for some reason, this has kind of come into focus more this last week, and I can't give you all the details on this either. But I realize that there is actually an amazing number of people in our fellowship who have had bad experiences, including with CSA, and both the perpetrator and the victim have moved on with God's grace. And the reason we don't hear from those people so much is because they've moved on. And so to me, those kinds of people are actually the hardest to hear because they moved on. And yet this last week I was looped into a few things, and I realized that we cannot be going forward without considering this group of people. And one thing that I need to say with this, I want to say with this, is it's really important that when we think about that group of people, that it doesn't make us critical of the people that aren't in that group, if that makes any sense. Like, because there are people that have actually received God's grace to move on, it doesn't mean that the people that aren't there yet haven't received God's grace. I mean, it's easy to compare and say, well, get over it. And the problem is, people have been traumatized in different ways, and we have to have a heart for the people that are stuck where they are for whatever reason. And maybe I shouldn't even say stuck. That sounds really negative. I should just say they are where they are, and it's for a reason. And those people, they don't need to be guilt tripped. They don't need to have more guilt than they already have. They don't need any more condemnation. They do need our care. And so somehow we've got to keep both of those things in balance. But there's no doubt that just having a better look at that segment of people among us, it puts a different perspective on things for me. I'll have to say, Wayne and Brian and I, we were talking to the overseers again this afternoon, and that's one thing that is very noticeable on the calls is they have the same stories as far as they are aware of people in this that again they have there are some people, because of what they've been through and God has left it in the past, they feel like it needs to be left in the past. And then for us to continually dwell on this, it actually in a way, it re-traumatizes them, re-victimizes them. And we cannot ignore that. And it's really, I mean, again, all these things we got to keep in balance, because we've got to reach the people who really need to be cared for. And we don't want to be talking about people in an uncaring way. I am guessing that there's people in this room that are going to meet the very person who this report is about this year. And you will not know when you are talking to a victim, survivor. And again, I'm not making any judgments about this or anything else. I'm just saying that when you're talking to people, it would just be nice to talk as though this is a traumatized person, like this is a fragile person, because in some ways we all are. And if we can talk to each other and care for each other in a way that even if it was the most fragile person, it would be okay. They would be safe with us. Then we would be safe with everyone. And I really do think that is something that I need to figure out more. Because it's easy, it's easy when I'm with people who I think kind of believe like me to kind of get wound up and get really carried away with the things that I think that we share beliefs with. And I've known that has happened this last year with people that were there in that audience that were actually victim survivors that nobody had any idea about. And again, it's not just that that we're thinking about them, but we're just thinking about like how do we love people, and really if I'm being careful enough that anybody could be safe in my presence at any time, I'm going to be my most edifying self. And it just seems like I take a lot of liberties sometimes with that when I'm with the people who I think believe like I think. So one of the things that I'm going to have to say, and again, I have to be a little guarded when I say this. I mean, I don't want to say too much, but I don't know of anyone that was closely involved in this investigation that would say this was a win. And I don't know anyone that was closely involved in the investigation that would ever do it again. And I've of course talked to everybody that's been involved. And at this point, I'm going to have to say, from my perspective, I'm not sold on investigations. And that's a pretty major thing. Because if I'm not sold on investigations, our guidelines have problems. And so, and I don't know how everyone else is feeling about this. I mean, we'll talk about this later. But I'm so there's been some effort to relook at the guidelines, try to think, where are we going from here? I know that there's some on the staff that have actually tried to take the guidelines and trim them down and maybe kind of loosen them up a little bit. There's still a lot in those guidelines about investigations. And seriously, can I just say this? We can spend a lot of time on investigations, a lot of time and money, and not change anybody's mind. And so what have we done? It's really quite a thing to come to that realization. And even though and like when we hired Grace, the idea of that was that it would be like the gold standard, in that if we had an investigation like that people would be able to trust the results. Well, I don't think it changed anybody's mind. If it did, I don't know who it is. So it's just something to think about. And maybe we can say, well, we're going to do this because that's what the investigation came out. But is that like, where does that really get us? Anyway, stuff to think about. So then, so yesterday, among other among other guidelines and things that we were going through. Interestingly enough, one thing that happened is yesterday afternoon, Alan Mitchell called me from Australia, and he goes, "Hey, Daryl, I've got to hear about your investigation. How are you feeling about it?" And I said, "Well, Alan, I don't think I'd do it again." He said, "Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Do you mind talking to all the overseers in Australia and New Zealand about this?" It's like, well, I mean, I'll tell you about my experience, and so I think tomorrow afternoon I'm going to be talking to all of them on a Zoom call, and I think what the deal is that Alan had kind of come to the same conclusion we already had. Well, in the meantime, I remembered a few months ago we got a set of guidelines from Missouri and we've got guidelines from all over the place, but Missouri. And what those guidelines are is that George Peterson sat down and formed guidelines using the Scriptures. And it's pretty brief. It's, it's not real detailed, but it's scriptural. And so I wrote to Craig Winquist yesterday, and I said, can I get a copy of those? And so he sent me a copy. Anyone that wants one, I could send them to you. But then he added this note, and this gives you a little idea of what we're up against. He said, I just sent you what we are working with here in our 3-state area. We have been challenged on about every aspect of it, from the foundational issues with the ministry to the inadequacy of how we plan to deal with current CSA-SA incidents. Anyway, I understand the difficulty in coming up with a policy. I think it is actually impossible. We had a man in Oklahoma who was unhappy with our approach and started writing what he thought would be a good approach. After a number of attempts, he said, you cannot write a policy. So, all the best. It would be good to be in touch again. So, one thing that I feel right now is no matter what we do, it's going to be divisive. Everything has been, and it will continue to be. But I feel like if what we determine, like what we compile, what we make as guidelines go, if it's scriptural, at least it won't divide spiritual people, because it's the Scriptures that unite us. It's what we all believe. And so what I'm proposing tonight, and this may not be everybody's forte, but I'm going to propose it, and we'll just see where we go with it. And that is, Wayne and Brian and I have talked about this, that what we're going to do is we're going to try, like have a Google Doc. We're going to share it with just the whole staff, and any of you that want to be involved can be involved. And we're going to try to just make a document of how scripturally we should deal with the issues that we're dealing with. And we can use some of George's scriptures, put them in there, but maybe some others. Like maybe one thing that we should put, and I don't want any long explanations. What would be good is just some scriptures, like maybe a verse and maybe just a short summary, or whatever. I mean, we could kind of think about that. And so we can share this document. We can all work on it together. We can check each other. Like, is this really what the Scripture was intended to be used for? Like, really try to keep Scripture in context as much as possible, and just kind of see what we can come up with. I don't think it's going to make everybody happy, but I don't think it will divide spiritual people. I think it can bring us together. In my mind, we basically have two choices right now. We either have a policy like that, or we don't have a policy. And this is very distressing. It's going to be very distressing to some people. I think of the guidelines team that have spent so much time on this. They, just to be quite open about this, they would actually be more okay with us not having any guidelines than to take their guidelines and trim them down and basically create holes in them. because what they're concerned with that is that we're giving this impression that we have this new level of safety, but yet there's so many holes in what we're presenting that it's actually an illusion. That's what they're thinking in their minds. And so they would actually, and so they don't want us taking their guidelines and doing anything with them. Like they feel like that's unethical, and it may be. And that's why I feel like if we're going to do anything, we should probably build it from scratch. And I like the idea of, at this point, if we're going to build something from scratch, let's start with what we all agree with, and that's the Word of God. Some like today when we were talking to the older brothers about all these things, the one contrast that was brought up, and I think that this might be why we're not getting this to work. I mean, there's probably lots of reasons, but one is I think the policies that we've been trying to develop are actually corporate policies, but this is a family, and so it's like bringing a corporate policy home from work and trying to get your family to function according to this corporate policy. And so you know, maybe you can make some of it work, you know, if you try, but basically it's not a good idea. The two are not compatible. Our family and our corporations are not, they don't run the same way. And I know like right from the beginning with the guidelines, Jerry Cormick is one of them. He's just been saying this does not sound family enough. You know, he'd say that over and over, and it's like, well, it just needs to be reworded. It needs to be more in a family vernacular. But, you know, I think we're to the point where we realize it's not just the wording. And so the question is, at this point, then what are we doing? Like, are we really ready to assume those kinds of risks? And I have said right from the very beginning, I cannot sleep at night if I know that I am knowingly putting children at risk by my policies, like what I'm doing. And I mean, we would feel sick if we had a choice. We could make a choice that would save a child from this kind of thing. But so the question is, how much are we really opening it up? And one of the questions that I think about is how, like the one thing that we are going to emphasize is report. Like, call the police, like call the local authorities, get the local authorities involved. And of course, we've already had this discussion ever since the FBI days. We've had this discussion, and so if it's just report it. And another thing is education. So if we are doing what we can to educate people, and we are making it very clear that things need to be reported, what percentage of our risk have we actually already dealt with? And that's what I don't know. It might actually be really, really high. I'm guessing it is really, really high. But and so then these other things that we're doing with the guidelines, I don't know what percentage of the risk that they actually cover. I'm guessing it's going to be small, but still it's probably a percentage. I just don't know what to say about that. By going without such clear guidelines, it's going to leave a lot more to the discretion of elders and the ministry. And we can look at that both ways. Hopefully, if we ourselves are more educated, that and also spiritual and prayerful enough, that would actually be the best case scenario. But again, I'm just throwing these things out. You're going to get your chance to talk here in a minute. These are just the things we're considering right now. So yesterday I talked to my brother who has a business up in Anchorage, and then today we were talking with Richard Denherter, who's in Ireland right now, and yesterday he was with Jane Bell, Jane Bell and talking to her. And she's actually working on some of the things that I have the biggest issue with. And that is, number one, how can we treat everyone as a pedophile? Like in the guidelines, that's basically what happens, is we're treating everyone as a pedophile, even though we know they're not. And so that's one. Do you know, Carrie, what is she, like a psychiatrist or what is she? Social worker. Anyway, they're really trying to study that aspect and how you can actually determine levels of risk more accurately. And her thought is, if we knew the level of risk more accurately, we would know better. Like, is this someone who should never be in meetings, or is this someone that should be in a closed meeting, or is this someone that could actually be in just a regular fellowship meeting again? Anyway, it's kind of interesting. That's one of her thoughts. But the other thing about guidelines that both my brother and Jane were saying is that the best form of guidelines is try to imagine the kind of person that you want everyone to be, and so just like try to describe that person, and make this vision of the ideal person, this goal of what we're trying to be, which of course in our case is going to be like Christ, but nonetheless try to identify that, and then maybe some loose guidelines about how you actually become that person. And both Jane and my brother in writing Policy Up in Anchorage, they both said exactly the same thing, that's what they came to, is you try to identify this person, make that really clear. Everything else is loose, because the more tight you make, actually the word that Jane used was brittle, but it's like where there's just no room. Everything's tightened out. The tighter you make the guidelines, actually, the more brittle they are. Goals, like aspirational. Okay. Okay. The good person. Whew. Yeah. We jumped. We jumped topics there. Yeah. Like when you're trying to tell your corporation, like you're putting these guidelines together, but the best thing is to actually have this model of this person who we're trying to become. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, your turn. If anyone has any questions or talking this, so
I just want to share with you. I was staying with a couple, and the wife spoke to me about how she felt about all this, and they have a meeting in their home, and I actually was very much agreeable with her. Is that they felt as a meeting home that they are responsible for their meeting and to care who comes and who goes and how it is. That it's not following a list of rules, but it's just being common sense with how they feel their own meeting is comfortable. Each person, because each meeting will be a little different. That's all. I was totally in agreement, because it's been how I've felt with who the elders, I think, know their meetings more than we do.
And as long as we're doing what we can for education to where the elders are aware, yeah, for sure.
I was reminded when you were talking about what you said when we were talking about divorce and remarriage, and you said where there's difference, there's conflict, or where there's where we differ. And so the more the older brothers can feel comfortable with things together, the less conflict we're going to have, it feels like. And like you said, Scripture.
Well, I was wondering if I was the only one that never heard or never saw this Grace report. Another thing is, I like the family concept, because you can't, even in family, you force something into being. There has to be a form of discipline. And we don't have that. We say you can't go to meeting. Is that discipline? Or are we denying them that which could strengthen them and enable them to be this ideal man we're talking about? I felt from, well, not in the beginning, but later, that we were rushing, and there was a need to wait, maybe to let things soak. And maybe this is what's happening and this is what's coming up. And I like the thought of this being, we focus on the scriptural side of things, and we're going to find out that it's there. It's not specific sometimes, but what the dangerous things that God saw are cataloged several times, starting in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and going into the New Testament. We need to be aware of that. One thing that is necessary in my mind, along with being scriptural, is that, like you were saying, we have to make room. We have to consider the people that have gone on and left it behind. We don't know, you don't know all those people. You never will. But they have gone on. So that proves it's possible. I never did like the wording that says that you, once a pedophile or once a CSA or whatever you want to call it, you always are. That's not true. The studies that they made, the studies were all on groups of individuals that had no dealings with the Spirit of God. And when God begins to deal with his people and there's a willingness in the heart of that person, there is a change. Can be a change. And we think of these people that maybe a single incident in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, or maybe even 10 years or 5 years. And let the Spirit of God work. We need to be very careful for them. And the thought has just come the last couple of weeks, are we making a new level of victims? In that we're saying, okay, you can't come, you can't go. We're victimizing them. We're making them victims of our decision. In our guidelines, there has to be that guidance of the Spirit of God, and I don't think you can put that down in writing. In botany, you take a taxonomy. You use a plant key to determine the genesis and species of plants, and you go A, B, C, D, and you answer all these little questions, and you get over to what it is. We can't do that with people. We can't do that with the Spirit of God does, because it knows, and God knows, and Christ knows, but you and I don't. We need to be extremely careful in what we're trying to do. If I said anything, I don't know, but
I know this Jane Bell over there in the Great Britain. She would agree with you, actually, that we have to be careful that these needy sinners, called perpetrators, are not being cut off from the very help that they need. And so, but again, like we've talked about, we can have closed meetings and they can still have help. But anyway, we're going to have to be careful with that, because it's not just them that are being cut off. It's their families are really being affected too. A lot of other people are being affected. It's a lot to think about.
I don't want to be the only one to talk, but can we really promise safety spiritually, like natural safety on a spiritual level? The reason I'm saying this, like, I saw innumerable things in Colombia that I wish I could drive in.
What is the driving force behind the guidelines? Who has said you will have guidelines? Or
so there's a number of things driving it. One is there's a lot of people that just want comfort, want some assurance from us that we actually are seeing this for what it is and we're taking it seriously. And just knowing that much will be a comfort to some people. Another thing about the guidelines is the hope, the attempt was made to be more fair in dealing with these situations, because it's really easy to judge according to your favorite person, and especially with CSA things, it's really hard to take the word over some young person who doesn't have necessarily any great reputation and take their word over someone that does have a good reputation, somebody that you honor and respect. And as we know, that happens where you have these basically obscure people who have been hurt by the people we respect the most. And so how do you, like you need more than just feelings on sorting that out. Because like from our perspective, we're going to go in the favor of the one that we respect. But according to professionals, it would almost always go in the favor of that obscure person who reports. And so it's trying to just to deal with this more justly, fairly, uniformly, and for people to understand what we're going to do. And even like the safety team or whoever has to deal with this stuff, to say, hey, this is what we've decided we're going to do. So it's not a big emotional thing. It's not like, well, why are you picking on me, or why is he doing this but I can't do this, or whatever. It's like it's just kind of all laid out so people know. Those are some of the reasons. Maybe someone will have some other ideas. But another thing is, it looks good to officials, like obviously people outside the fellowship, knowing that we're taking it serious, that we've taken accountability for what's happening.
I just have this question. Kind of in the beginning, when you shared the FBI's, what they first talked to you about, and they said, basically they wanted to take care of it, let the law take care of it, let the law of the land and the way they do it. And then they would determine one way or another, but maybe this, with this investigation, this last, that, we just can't live with that, them determining whether a person is safe or not. So it's just a thought that keeps coming to me. Are we, like what we read, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God. So we need to be accountable, and our friends need to know we are trying. But there is the law, and we've been advised. And so, anyway, that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and we definitely need we need to put emphasis on what you're talking about. There's no doubt about that. I think the thing that we struggle with the most is old stuff. I think we have a lot better idea how to go forward than how to take care of what's in the past. And so a lot of the guidelines, even, they would be about like what place people are going to have as far as in the past. Hard to. The one thing that we're finding out is that people, a lot of times they don't report for decades. And who was saying the other day that was saying, like, the people that have reported, like the Cynthia or whatever, like the average is like 20 years after the incident or something like that. And so if that continues, well, we're always going to be dealing with old stuff is what it boils down to. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to change among us this thought of like trying to hide things. But it needs, like, the sooner it's reported, the better. But even though I'm saying that, you heard what I said before, I don't think it's right to go around and dig up stuff. See, that's what we don't want to do. That is not what we're trying to encourage to do. We're not trying to become this communist group that's spying on each other. That is not what we're trying to do here.
One thing that I have two things that I was wondering about. One is, so what would that mean for the safety group? Because I know I've heard from a few people that they've appreciated knowing that there's somebody there that they can talk to when they have concerns. And the other thing was just considering about how that there's a distinction between dealing with spiritual problems and dealing with natural problems. And it is tempting in certain groups to want to depend on the Bible for natural problems, in which case people will often say, well, don't go to the doctor, just pray about it, because in the Bible it says if you pray about it, you'll be healed. And, oh, well, don't take care of this natural problem with a natural doctor who has natural training on how to take care of it. Just pray about it and the natural problem will go away, which does not happen with natural problems. And so I was just wondering about that too.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why we feel like there has to be some emphasis kept on education, and also emphasis kept on the fact that we do report. And those two things, as much of it, the more of it we can leave in the hands of the law, the better. Like on many levels. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed through the years in several different disciplines, some of which are among us as a fellowship, is that when something is introduced, it almost carries with it a certain permission then to talk about it. So, for example, scripturally based guidelines, it's similar to somebody on the platform, for example, introducing a topic, biblically based, and talking about it. Well, then afterwards, everybody's talking about it because it's like there's this permission now because it's been made maybe open, available. It's been introduced as part of what we are, and so now we talk about it. And the benefit to that is that we kind of find out about ourselves individually, and then when we start visiting with somebody else in dialogue and engaging ourselves within them, we find out where people are actually at. And we also can take that sense of permission and even investigate a little bit, like, well, why do you think like that? And why would you want that over what scriptures teach? It seems for these people, like 10, 20, 30 years later, some instances 61 years later, they've never felt permitted. It's like they would have to open up the whole discussion on their own, taking everything to a level they had never seen anybody move to. So, to me, providing a flat surface to which everybody can go to helps the weak, tempers the strong, provides some framework. It doesn't have to be like a hard, fast thing, but I think a lot of the education that we need, sensibilities, appreciations, and the edifying of one another and the building together for health and unity will happen when we feel that, sense that permission. Because I've never sat in a circle like this before, my fellow workers, and we seem to have found some permission, haven't we, to be saying quite a bit. And I'm actually not the worse for it, the better for it. So thank you, one and all.
So James, today I actually had a really exciting thought. I thought, if we sat down right now and figured out how Matthew 18 would apply to some of these situations and how to actually exercise what Jesus said to do, imagine if we transferred that over to some other areas of our lives. Don't you think we would all get a lot healthier? It would benefit us in areas that go way beyond CSA, SA. Yeah.
I appreciate what was said about the natural and the spiritual. They're separate, but Jesus was the Son of Man, and he was also the Son of God. And I know that sometimes the spiritual and the natural is very, very, very intertwined. And I know that that God is spiritual, and he can help us open, that even doors would open in a natural way to help us. It is intertwined, and so it won't be easy to create something from the Scripture, but it'll be possible because Jesus was also the Son of Man, and many of the things that he dealt with is because we have a human nature, and it is helpful to remember that. I can't just explain it, but there's times that you need help, and it does involve both. You need help for something natural, but you can pray to God about it and ask him for help, and he opens a natural door. He can open a door of someone that knows how to help you.
So one thing that I really like thinking about scriptural guidelines is that they defend themselves like God's Word. You can't argue with God's Word. And anything else, any other guideline, depending on who you talk to, you're going to have trouble defending it. And I remember when I was on my trip, and there were some people who would ask me about what's going on over here and stuff, and I'd start to try and explain, and after a little while, I'd be thinking, this sounds really crazy. Like it didn't even make sense to me when you start to explain it to somebody who doesn't know what's really going on. But if we have something that's scriptural, it defends itself. Truth is truth.
Yeah. I'll loop back that. Go ahead.
So just a couple comments. And I mean, of course, we've been struggling over these things for a long time, and on the one hand, like it sounds great to me to just let the elders figure out what's best for their meeting. But then on the other hand, I don't know. One thing is when, so like now, like the safety team, they're educated, they know and understand things, and then once you know things, it's hard to not act accordingly. Like they feel responsible with that information to act in the most ethical way because they understand this deceptive world of, anyway. One comment, like with scriptural guidelines, like we already have scriptural guidelines. It's the Scripture. So in one sense, it's kind of like just saying, well, we'll just do what we've always done. Anyway, these are just comments. I'm not trying to. Back to the third-party investigation topic. The alternative to not doing third-party investigations is just to believe every allegation. And like, are we willing to do that? Anyway, it's things to think about. Yeah, and then there's statute of limitations and anyway, like I think about the cases in our region, and I think per the guidelines, there would be 2 that would require a third-party investigation. But in my mind, I don't think they do. I feel like we know enough, and it doesn't feel very ethical to take the money that the friends have donated to the ministry and just be pouring it into investigations. So yeah, it's a little bit of a conundrum there. And as far as the safety team going forward, I don't know.
I agree. I think we have to, like I really, really am glad to have them around right now. They are taking a load off of me. They're not, and not just doing that, but they're so supportive, and they're spiritual. They share verses and thoughts, and it seems to me like they're filling a really, really important place right now. And we may have to kind of think a little bit more about their exact role, but I'm not ready to say they don't have a role. Yeah. Gary.
After I spoke Sunday afternoon, I was approached by a man, and he said, "Are you trying to say that all the allegations are wrong?" Well, that was never mentioned in what I was talking about. And giving power to an independent group to tell us what to say and who we can't say, that's not scriptural. Because if I have a godly message, I need to deliver it. We read of Amos and Jeremiah, just to mention 2, that were threatened by civil authorities. Well, Jesus himself was there because of their message. So we need to be very careful on that level too. How much can they tell us not to say?
So did that actually come from a group? Like did that? Whoa. Oh. Okay. Yeah, there is a difference. Big difference.
So, actually, my comment is much like Joyce's comment, and the problem we really face here is, or from my perspective, is that parts of the body get sick, and I've had some issues, and your pancreas fails, you go see a pancreas doctor, and heart, and et cetera, and you see a specialist that way. And we know that the mind, it can get affected. We know that, and there's specialists for that also. But we also know that if the problem is just a wrong spirit, it doesn't matter how many specialists you go to. There's only one specialist that can help, and that the discerning in there, that's what we're dealing with. It's a spiritual problem that way, and it doesn't matter which side it goes on. Eventually, it swings back to the power of God to do what we can with what's been given us, and eventually we all have to move on. Eventually, we can't nobody just stays in the same place forever. If you do, you're not in a very good spot. And so, any effort there I mean, I'm for it, but eventually, it has to. I mean, that's what Jesus said. I am the great physician. I didn't come here to save the righteous. You know, we are the halt, the maimed, the sick, and the lame, and the blind, and that's who he came to help. And anyway, that's my comment.
One other thing I'm wondering about is if we are looking to the Bible for basing any documents that we're writing, to what extent are we planning on depending on what the Old Testament says as far as what Jesus said?
Joyce?
Well, just real quick. Is the safety team, is all of their training in the videos we got?
No. There's it's hard to describe all of the education, like in all of the conversations. I mean, it's not just that.
Yeah. So that was all grace training? Was that all grace training that they got, or did they have other? Yeah. Okay. Because a lot of us have done that, like looked at all of that too.
Well, I mean, they've been cautious. But like with
Yeah, I mean they've just been talking with lots of people who are relevant professionals. And
there's been a thought that's come across to me is that our people are too dumb to understand what's going on. And we don't want that. They're no dumber than we are. And in many cases, they're smarter than we are, and they have an awareness of what's going on in the world that we don't have. And we just need to be very, very careful that way.
I just appreciate the safety team, I think, because we've come across a couple of situations that we haven't really known how to handle, and I don't want to run to you every time I have a problem that I don't know how to handle, because I know that's too much for you. So at this point, if we have something like that, it's the safety team we would turn to, right? Okay. And also as far as elders, knowing and doing the right thing in their meeting, not all elders are qualified, and we wouldn't always trust them, so that's a problem too, I think.
Well, I have to tell you that I ran into a situation, and I'm not free to share the details except that there's some prejudice, I would say, some family background prejudice on the safety team that against, anyway, I can't go into detail about it, but that scares me too, because I think because there was already feeling in the family, it's been used against the other family member. Does it make any sense? Anyway, it just scares me because we're all human and we have backgrounds that came before all this. And maybe it wasn't CSA, but it's family feelings, and I think it is affecting how they deal with some of the situations.
I think one of the key things is the safety team is not making decisions alone. The elders are not making decisions alone. The ministry is not making decisions alone. The key thing is that we are collaborating. We are working together on decisions going forward. None of it's going to be done in a vacuum without any communication. Yeah. Yeah.
Because other people are being hurt by decisions by a decision that a safety team member made. So does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that I can really share it all, but that is a concern to me, going forward.
And the safety team is communicating about things, right? So if that happens with a particular safety team member, it needs to be addressed with all the safety teams. Then, that's Matthew 18, right? You take it to your brother, you take it to others. Sorry, my actual comment is I do think it would be good to have some natural guidelines just as far as the process of how things happen. I should know how to iron a shirt, but I still don't really know how to iron a shirt. So, I can go on YouTube and I can watch, okay, you iron this part first and that part next. And, when I see something, who do I talk to first? Who do I not talk to? What questions do I ask? What questions do I not ask? Who needs to be reported? All those things, we're not going to find them in the Bible. I'm going to find that I need to be compassionate and that I need to be kind, but I'm not going to find, who and what I talk to. So if there's just some natural guidelines of, this is the process we follow, that would be really helpful to me.
I think one thing we all know is that there's no set of laws that's ever going to regulate human nature. And we do the best we can. And the thing that sets us apart and the thing that fails us is whether or not we're led by the Spirit. And the Bible does work, and the words of Jesus work 100% of the time that they're used. But they're often not amongst us. And Jesus taught that. 5 were wise and 5 were foolish, and they were walking together. So we can do whatever we want. We're not going to keep everybody safe, because there are going to be some people amongst us that are going to figure out how to get around the law, and I appreciate all the effort. But I think at the end of the day, like you say, awareness, being able to talk about it, like James said, that's making a huge difference. But even in corporations, the minute you set laws in, people begin to find out how to get around them, and they do, and we hear about it all the time. And that's how it'll be with people who intend to harm people. They will find a way until they're found out. And so anyway, I'm just so aware that it's the Spirit and it's the words of Jesus, and it's got to be our focus. It's got to be. And all these other things, if we have to put them in, that's great. And one other thing about the safety team, in Acts 6, those men had a very limited focus. It was so that the Grecian women got their part of the daily ministration. If we can keep their focus narrow, that will help. The things that have distressed some of us is when they've gotten beyond what we thought their focus was. If we could keep it narrow, I'm in favor of the safety team. I'm in favor of Daryl's burden being lightened, but I'm not in favor of them making policy for private property and telling workers what to speak and that kind of thing. That goes beyond the Grecian widows getting their daily administration. Anyway, that's too long.
And just one more comment about this natural and the spiritual. It's true that we can get a lot of natural help, and we cannot get a lot of natural help if we don't want to get any kind of help. You have to want it, and if we don't have soft and tender hearts that want help and ask God for help, then the natural help won't really benefit us either. And if we try to have a condition of heart that wants to be right, wants to be soft, doesn't want to be bitter, and those things are going on in our natural, with our mind or with something that's not just right, God can open doors. If we truly want to be right, He can open doors that we can get natural help when we need it. But it won't profit us if we don't want to be right with God. There's such a connection there. Yeah.
I've also really appreciated the safety team, and it feels like they would be a really good role as counselors. They also look really overwhelmed and tired, the ones that I've seen. And, yeah, I wonder if some of the decisions are too hard on them also. One of the safety team members said that a certain decision they made, they had to make it because if something were to happen in 10 years' time, it would be their heads kind of thing, which is a scary thing, I think, for them to live under, where if they were a counseling role to the ministry, seems like they're a wonderful help. Like a resource, a walk through the process if we have to turn something in, because they do have the resources, a place we can tell anybody, call them, they know the numbers, they have the resources. I love having that. I love saying call the safety team, you know.
Evan, Mike.
Mike Evan.
I wish we could just not even have published guidelines, right? But it doesn't seem like that's an option. I wish we could just deal with things. But anyway, I mean, I think that'd be really nice to just, like, I think about, so like when Doyle put out his guidelines, like they were a little, I don't remember what they were, but they were a little more vague and loose, and he got a lot of heat for that initially. But then, like, someone the other day was talking to Cynthia Lyles, and she just made the comment, actually, Doyle's doing a good job of just quietly handling things. So, I don't know. Maybe there's a way to just handle things.
Yeah. So I'll send everyone. Oh.
Yeah, like, do we really need to reinvent the wheel, or can we just adopt? Because, like we are, if we start over, how long is that going to take?
The longer, the better. I mean, believe me, what we're talking about, like right now, could have some major ramifications, and I mean, like major. Like one thing is, if we decide to pull the plug on guidelines, or even to go with the ones we're talking about, we probably are saying goodbye to Olympia Convention. I'm guessing we are. And half of Seattle. I know. Mm-hmm. And see, my feeling is that's what I like about spiritual guidelines is I think everyone who loves the scriptures they'll be okay with that. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know either. Like we try to forecast how it'll play out, and we just don't know. But one thing that it's a strong calling for me to go labor for the one. Like Jesus said, leave the 99, go after the one who's out there. And I feel like that's what we're trying to do with these guidelines. And it feels like a political move to be like, well, this is what's going to be the most, this is what most of the friends will be comfortable with. That feels like a political move rather than a spiritual move. Anyway, but I'm not sure what is the best way to go after the one. Obviously, the best way is for them to hear the gospel, but they don't feel comfortable enough to come to gospel meetings. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to get into judging who's a sheep or not.
Use the microphone, please.
I'm not trying to start a war or anything. I'm just curious if somebody knew another scripture where goats were actually mentioned in the New Testament in regards to the people other than Jesus' judgment of them at the end of time. Because so many times Jesus saw all of those people that we just all read about during prayers. He saw them as sheep having no shepherd. And that helps me to realize there's a lot of people out there. There's people that used to have the same shepherd that we have, that enjoyed the same things. We love them. We still love them. But I want to see them as sheep having no shepherd, not just, I mean, I realize that they aren't responding, But a sheep that has no shepherd is just going to be doing its own thing and wandering out there, and it's probably not going to look good for their future because they need a shepherd. Sheep don't last without a shepherd. And I don't know, I just feel like I do have a heart of compassion for people that, no, I don't want to go join them and in the sense of going out there and being with them out there, but I would like the gospel to be able to reach them and continue to reach them and treat them as sheep, even if maybe they're acting like a goat. I've seen sheep act like goats before with each other, and man, they got a powerful headbutt, but and we can too. But I also realize that they are sheep without a shepherd, and I don't know of any other scripture, and I want to be corrected if I'm wrong. The only time is when Jesus said, these are sheep and these are goats, and I'm not Jesus, and I'm thankful for that. I mean, I'd like to be like Jesus, but I'm not the one in the judgment seat.
I feel like I've been on a roller coaster. I hate to follow a spiritual input of Ross's with an emotional one, but we are going to face a tremendous amount of backlash if we leave our group and say we're dropping this and we're dropping that, and that's just what some people are waiting for. And okay, they happen to be people. So I want to leave. We're obviously not finished, and that means we're growing, hopefully, rather than giving up. I'd like to leave with a strong thrust that we're doing something even better. I like the idea of the education of that group that are, what was the word? The group that is traumatized. I know some of them. I'm related to some of them. I love that we can meet their needs. But let's not leave with hands up, I won the war, we're dropping the guidelines. But man, I feel like I've been like this in the last 2 months, and starting with the guideline team a little bit early and educating myself, getting over my anger about the guidelines, making it positive. I kind of feel like, I don't know, like I've been left out the last month, and I know we can't all be involved, but I'm scared.
I'll agree with Ross about the sheep and the goat. Sheep don't last very long without a shepherd, but neither does a vine, neither does a branch last very long. If it cuts itself off from the vine, you can put it in a pretty vase. How long will it live? It'll never produce fruit. And a sheep that's off on its own and has a lamb, it's not going to last. And yes, we want to reach them. It grieves us. It grieves us when we think of those that say, and that just walk away. And what do they have in the future? Pardon?
Well, like with that ability though that we're the box.
I think what he's saying is if we're offering them Jesus and they're saying, I don't want that, I want guidelines. It's guidelines that will make me comfortable, not Jesus, that they're making a choice. He's not saying, we're saying you're cut off, we're the vine, but like, and that's how I feel with that finding the lost one too. I'm not saying you're a goat. I'm saying the very best I have to offer is Jesus. And if they don't want Jesus, if they don't want the words of God that came from Jesus, if they don't want the scripture that came from God, I have nothing else to offer them. The guidelines actually probably won't make them content either, because there was possibly something far deeper. And I really care too. Some of my family members have quit going to meeting. I don't think it's very long before more stop. Like, I'm heartbroken. I'm devastated, because it's not just meeting either. It's that they're turning their back, and I can tell on other things, on Jesus. And that matters, and I'm devastated. But I also know that the best thing I can continue to offer them is Jesus. The best thing I can do is stay firmly on the rock. And if I waver from that, what do I really have to offer them? Something that will make them happy on this earth? Something that will make them happy for this lifetime? but lead them to a lost eternity? Like, I want to offer them Jesus, the thing that we know is hope for all eternity. I don't want to offer them anything but that.
I feel like Jesus has shown me a lot of care, and I think that's maybe why I love him most, and like God is just kind to reassure me. And over again from the victims, the thing that seems to be the most hurtful is a lack of care. And I think like dropping the guidelines could be seen as a lack of care, but I also have concerns about the way the guidelines were written. So I guess my question is, how can we show care to the victims? How can we actually, and I don't even mean that, I mean, how can we show care to everyone? Like, is there a positive that can come out of this that's like, how can we show care?
I love how you've just been able to express it. We know our responsibility is to preach the gospel, but we're meeting fewer and fewer people in the gospel meetings. And so we need to learn how to not be traumatizing within the field. We have to be educated on, like the behavior of Jesus, because we might be doing the very thing that's stopping people from being in the meetings.
Sometimes when I say things, I don't know, people get perturbed. So I'm not trying to say things to get people perturbed, but you know what I mean? I just, so however we roll, you know what I mean? Guidelines, scripture, you know, I'm with you. But, and I'm totally exactly like Allison feels and like you. I mean, that's how we all feel. I feel like the reason we need something strong is because there's been horrible overseer mistake after mistake. If you look at the last century, it's just mistake after mistake. It's a long ways. I mean, it's just horrible, atrocious. And, you know, so that's where I'm at. Anyways, so.
So it seems to me that it's really hard to know just what direction to go here. And I feel like the time will come when it will be clear what direction to go. I don't know if that's really the time now. And it'll all be, I don't want to say and so much, hopefully among us it'll be a collective choice that we will. But I hesitate to say this, but so I don't know how many of you younger ones know what happened in Alaska. I was very much involved in that, and I really, truthfully, can enter into those of you who have really labored for those who are on the edge, so to speak. I'm glad there seems to be this understanding that there's an edge both ways. There's an edge both ways, and right now, which way to go is unclear. And I remember there were years in Alaska. I was very much aware of that. There was an edge both ways. And what I'm going to share now is when it became clear to me, and of course that was a pretty high pressure situation, maybe even more so than what's going on right now. Overnight, when I declared myself that I was no longer with Truett's doctrine, overnight, one evening, 4 out of 5 of the friends in Alaska suddenly became associates of mine and not friends anymore. And I don't know if that's going to happen here or not, but it could happen. And I can totally, I don't really know the situation here. I'm glad I'm not involved in these decisions. Like I said this morning, and I said the other day that, you know, one thing I appreciate, really appreciate about Daryl, but also Brian and Wayne, is they're doing what they think is right, and I want to be a support of that, and and I just want to work for peace that way.
This is a thus saith Gary, but I think we're kind of at an impasse. We're going back and forth and saying the same thing with different words. I think we need to let it soak, and we need to let Carrie's refreshments refresh us, and then maybe another meeting sometime in the future.
So I've actually been wondering, can we just set it up so the Lord has to answer? Can we put out the fleece? Like, I don't even know what that would look like, but that would be really nice. Well, what have we been doing? Because,
Yes, Auntie, that's right, Auntie. No, specifically just to help us be united as a staff and to feel good about what's happening. And I just look at all of you and I feel like, regardless of guidelines, I feel like all of you are going to do what's right in this. Like, we've all been educated. We're all wanting to do. I feel like we all love our friends. We love those that have left. We love those that are in it. We're trying. I make mistakes. I say things wrong, but I've just prefaced every visit like, hey, just spit it out, and I'm not going to take offense at anything. And please don't take offense with me. Like, I'm just a human being. But I feel like we love the gospel, and we want people to get the gospel, and we want to be united as a staff. And I love you all, and I want us all to make it.
Personally, final.
We've talked a couple of times with different ones, and like going back to what Fred said about when things were happening in Alaska, and Karen and I have talked about this, and we talk about it like it's way back there, but there are still ripples from that go on today. So how come we think that we're going to make a decision now and get it all figured out, like, in the next couple of years? This is a 30, 50, 80-year thing. This is not. Anyway, so that helps me just to kind of back up from the intensity of my feelings when I want to, yeah.
I just want to say one encouraging thing, and that is that between Walla Walla last year and Walla Walla this year, there was a tremendous change, absolutely tremendous. Last year, there weren't that many people. Some testimonies were disturbed and off. Some of the workers were disturbed and off. And this year, there was none of that, and it was beautiful. And I think if that can happen in 1 year, we're making more progress than we know we are.
I was thinking today, I don't know when the last time we've actually heard each other pray. Like, it's always the visitors that pray at the workers' meetings. Yeah, I mean, when you speak, yes, but it's like as far as a group in a setting like this morning, we never really actually ever hear each other pray in a setting like that. I'm not suggesting that this has to happen right now or whatever, but a year ago in April, where were we? Kitties. Okay. Yeah, not all of us, but yeah. But regularly, I mean, like it's not something that we actually do much together, and I think that actually could be a helpful thing for us.
Pray together or forgot to give an answer?
I think it could be really helpful if we prayed in a situation like this,
not in a workers' meeting with all kinds of visitors, but we're focused on our problem as a staff. And maybe we need to hear each other